This episode of Shadows and Sightings contains explicit content, including strong language, graphic violence, gore, and discussions of sensitive topics like death and trauma. Listener discretion is advised.
What's up, all you ghouls and ghoulettes and spookies and spookettes, all you other people in between, to another episode of Shadows and Sightings, a paranormal podcast. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Nick.
And today we are going to be talking about a Native American folklore, the Wendigo.
Wendigo? Wendigo.
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 Wendigo. When did that change? That's what I want to know.
It changed never. It's always been the Wendigo.
Actually, I guess to be fair, it changed like an hour ago because we watched that movie and that guy made the correct pronunciation. You're like, oh,
Exactly.
Wendigo.
Yeah. We're coming in with some energy for this, as we just watched that movie Antlers, which is based on the Wendigo a little bit. What'd you think about it, Nick?
I thought it was good.
Yeah.
But I'm also like a huge fan of Guillermo del Toro. So like any of his movies, like it's going to be good. Oh, this is going to be so good.
I'm not really that familiar with
Yes, you are.
his work. I mean, I am, but I'm not like a big Del Toro fan.
I don't think I've ever seen a Del Toro movie that I wasn't satisfied with.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. What is he? What's like his biggest movie?
The Hellboy.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, Hellboy. He did Pan's Labyrinth. He did
Pan's what?
Pan's Labyrinth.
Pan's Labyrinth.
Labyrinth. Yeah, that one. He did that. The Shape of Water, which was cool because that was actually filmed. Well, I don't know if it was filmed there, but it's based in Baltimore.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, no wonder Daniel Radcliffe turned into a freak in The Shape of Water. Isn't that what happened?
You're thinking of a different movie.
Didn't he have sex with like a fish lady or something?
Well, there is a fish lady sex scene, but
yeah.
was that Radcliffe? That wasn't.
I'm pretty sure it was Radcliffe.
No way.
Yeah.
Lies.
Go ahead, Google it.
Oh, I'll Google this right now.
Google it right now. You're gonna find out.
That wasn't him. Doug Jones was the.
I refuse to believe that.
I don't know what Doug Jones is. Oh, he was the Silver Surfer? I didn't know that.
So Shape of Water was not Daniel Radcliffe?
It was not Daniel Radcliffe. No, it was Doug Jones.
He was in something.
I think you're thinking of Swiss Army Man.
No, I'm definitely not thinking of that. There was some movie Daniel Radcliffe was in where it involved him doing something with water. I swear. Lady in the Lake or some. I swear to you.
I mean, to be fair, he's played in a lot of random, weird, atypical roles.
The Woman in Black. That's what I was thinking of. That's what I was thinking of.
Brittany and I actually went and saw a live play of that downtown. It was actually really good. It was it wasn't at Black Box Studio. It was at the one next to it.
So the Black Box Theater. Was it the Washington County Playhouse or something?
You know what? I take that back. It was Black Box Theater. It was. And it was actually really good because it was one little tiny room.
Yeah, it's not very big.
A very tiny. Well, so you have like the stage. Have you been there?
No.
So they have like the main stage, and then they took us downstairs to the basement.
Ooh.
And had like black curtains set up everywhere. It was like around like Halloween. Yeah. I think it was last Halloween. And there was two actors. And like the people were walking around in between the curtains, like the lady in black, and they had this like creepy music playing, and they were like touching you on the shoulders. It was neat. It was like that. It was really cool for it being like, I don't want to say low budget, but for like the resources,
like a community project.
And it was actually really good. So it was pretty cool. But then we went and saw the actual movie.
It was like, this sucks.
I was like, I would so much prefer the play, and it was so much better.
I wonder what that movie or what the play's based on. Then was it just based on the movie?
Yeah, it was. It might have been a story originally. Like I don't know how old. I could be wrong on that.
Interesting.
But yeah, they just adopted the.
This movie's probably not by Guillermo del Toro.
No, that's not. But there was one main difference between the movie and the play. In the movie,
the people weren't real.
Yeah. In the movie, it's based off of Daniel Radcliffe's character. He's working as a lawyer or something, and his boss tells him, go to this estate, like this place to settle this estate fund or whatever. Not estate fund, but get their affairs in order. The play was Daniel Radcliffe's character as an older person retelling the story, years later.
I got
that
you.
was like the only thing, but still was pretty cool.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever actually seen Woman in Black, to be honest.
I have it. I'll let you borrow it.
Let me borrow it. You don't have to. I'm sure it's streaming on something somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Do people still lend DVDs?
God, I would appreciate that, I think.
They should bring back just like one Blockbuster.
There is one left.
Where?
Bend, Oregon. There's one Blockbuster left. It's the last Blockbuster on the planet.
It has to strictly just be for nostalgic purposes.
No, it's literally owned and operated by this one lady who has operated it for years. And she bought it. And I guess Blockbuster's parent company is T-Mobile or something like that. Yeah. Whoever bought them out to begin with. She never knows if they're going to renew the license that they can keep this Blockbuster. But yeah, there's a documentary on it. It was on Netflix, but I think now you can find it on YouTube or something. Yeah. It's called Last Blockbuster. It's really good. Sweet. I kind of want to go and just walk through those aisles one more time and rent just the most egregious movies I can find.
If you get a chance and ever find yourself in Bend, Oregon at this Blockbuster, we highly recommend renting the movie called Antlers.
Yeah, there you go. Nice way to bring that around.
A really good movie about the Wendigo, and as we were talking about earlier, Wendigo. I think it was produced by Guillermo del Toro.
Yes.
And I thought it was really good. And as we go into this episode, we'll talk about the different, what's the word? I'm kind of blanking.
Variations?
Variations of the Wendigo and how their take on it was kind of different, but different and similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do we got on the Wendigo?
So the Wendigo is a mythological creature or an evil spirit originating from Algonquin folklore. Wendigo is part of a traditional belief system of a number of Native American peoples. And although the descriptions can vary, common to all of those cultures is that the Wendigo is a malevolent, cannibalistic, supernatural being. They are strongly associated with winter, coldness, famine, and starvation.
What about so that's, it kind of comes from all of that. Those are the different, what are some of the descriptions about what it actually looks like? Talk about that a little bit, because I've seen some pretty bizarre and wild depictions of
it's one of those things where it varies kind of from culture to culture, I guess. Description I have is from the Legends of Nahini Valley. A native author named Basil Johnson described the Wendigo as being a gaunt to the point of emaciation. This guy really went for some big words here. Yeah. Was gaunt to the point of emaciation. Its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones, with its bones pushing out against its skin. Its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets. The Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody, unclean and suffering from suppuration of the flesh. The Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. So yeah, a lot of big words there.
and that's pretty true to home, I guess, as far as what the traditional depiction of what
the way it's kind of if you ever see a picture of it, I guess the best way to put that in layman's terms is it's almost like a skeletal deer with giant antlers coming out of its face and skull region.
Have you ever seen, there's another movie on Netflix, I think it's called The Ritual. Have you ever seen that?
I have not seen it, but I have seen the previews for it.
So there's the premise, it's these four buddies go on this camping trip out in the woods somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they come across some witchcraft, Blair Witch craft shit, strange stick emblems and figures, right. And, hexes and stuff in the forest.
Or cruxes.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Is that the right word?
Term? Spoiler alert. So, it's this cult that's, living out in, there's, this giant creature thing that has, antlers, and it's, walking on all fours, and it's, it's huge. Uh-huh. It's, the size of, a tree. And in some depictions of the Wendigo, it's the more it ate, the more, it would feed, the bigger it would grow. But the interesting thing about it, though, was no matter how much it eats, so its hunger continues to grow. It's ravaging, all of the victims and stuff. It actually doesn't physically get bigger. It just gets taller, and it continues to look, skeletal. So no matter, and I think that's kind of the symbolic, the symbolism behind the Wendigo. It's it can never be satiated. That's why it always looks skinny and decrepit.
Right.
Although it continues to feed and feed and feed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is, a lot of the folkloric tale behind it, the symbolism is kind of like hey, from a community standpoint, it's not good to be greedy. It's not good to like feed on, your own selfish desires.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a good point. Kind of elaborate what you were referring to. In some native cultures, Wendigos are often described as giants that are many times larger than human beings, a characteristic that's absent from the myths and other Algonquin cultures. Whenever a Wendigo ate another person, it would grow in proportion to the meal it just had eaten, so it can never be full. Therefore, the Wendigos are portrayed as simultaneously gluttonous and extremely thin due to starvation.
That would be terrible.
It would be terrible.
Can you imagine? Just like, oh man, this is a Big Poppy's burrito, and like you eat it.
Shouts out Big Poppy's.
Oh, you guys ever
deep fry my burrito next time, please?
If you ever get a chance, hit a Big Poppy's in Hagerstown, Maryland. Oh, it's my jam.
Yeah,
that's like that's like my.
Yeah, it's like you eat this giant burrito and you grow accordingly to that burrito, but it doesn't fill you up. So then you have to eat 3 burritos, and then you grow 3 times bigger to the size of the burrito, but
the size of the burrito,
as you're growing, it does not fill you up again. So you're just constantly starving and having to eat. That would be terrible death. That'd be like, it's like if a wizard would come by and he's like, you forevermore will have to sneeze, but you never can.
Oh, kill me. That would be like horrible. Like you can't see, or like an itch that like you
just cannot scratch.
You just can't scratch, but it's always there.
Where's the worst place to have an itch?
The itchy butthole is that's definitely up there. That, for sure. You just did. Oh,
there's no real way to make that,
because you can't do anything in public.
No, you can't.
Like you'll get charged. Feel like that guy was over there fondling himself. What are you gonna say? I'm sorry, officer. My asshole was itchy.
Just knuckle deep in an anus right now. Just
so you always just fist yourself at a Subway. Look, officer, okay, it's been a long day.
I don't appreciate you calling it fishing, but yes.
It's fisting, and yeah, you would too. You would too.
Your butthole itched like mine. Jesus.
Oh God. But there's also like different variations. Like, so that's, the Cree, another tribe. They actually have a different pronunciation for it called the Wetiko. I could be butchering that. I'm assuming based off of what it looks like, it's Wetiko. But if anybody out there has a correct pronunciation, please let me know. I'm open to feedback.
We definitely would like to pronounce these things correctly if we can.
But in the Cree term, it refers to a cannibal, or more specifically, an evil person or spirit who terrorizes other creatures by means of terrible evil acts, including cannibalism. The conclusion that imperialism and exploitation are forms of cannibalism. Precisely those. Let me start that over again. There was a little pop up, and I just realized I was reading the.
You're reading the terms and conditions instead. The Wendigo could sometimes steal your credit card information.
Okay, where was I? So the Cree, another tribe, they have what they call it the Wetiko, which refers to a cannibal, or more specifically to an evil person or spirit who terrorizes other creatures by means of terrible acts, including cannibalism. So, it kind of varies from like tribe to tribe, depiction to depiction, and a lot of it is more symbolic. So from like, the larger picture, they're thinking that, the Wendigo or the Wetiko is actually like an embodiment of like societal problems.
Well, we can talk about that later on down. Okay. We'll get to like the more mythological part of it first, and then we'll get into more, I think, psychological, social,
aspect of it.
So kind of piggybacking off of what you said a little bit, cannibalism seems to be the key origin of the story. Yeah. Every culture that describes a Wendigo is pretty much all in agreement that it comes from some sort of cannibalism.
And they kind of went into it in the movie.
Mm-hmm. One account of its origin claims that the tale goes that the Wendigo was once a lost hunter. During a brutally cold winter, the man's intense hunger drove him to cannibalism. After feasting on another human's flesh, he transformed into a crazed man-beast, roaming the forest in search of more people to eat. So that's kind of where some of that origin comes from. There's also some other stories in that vein as this myth kind of goes along. That seems to be kind of a starting point where it's not so much a supernatural force yet. It's somebody that drives themselves insane or kind of goes along that route after they've eaten human flesh.
Which is fine, which makes sense.
Which is fine.
which makes sense. There was a folk story collected in the early 20th century by Lodi Chickaquah Martin. I think I pronounced that right. Who was an ethnographer of the Chippewas of the Rama First Nation, in which a Wendigo also exhibits tool use, an ability to survive partial dismemberment, and auto cannibalism, which is interesting because we were talking about that. That it seems like a person who becomes this Wendigo creature, they become this like feral beast. They still maintain like sentient thoughts.
Yeah.
In the movie,
like rational human thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
Extent,
and like, so they're actually pretty intelligent because they're still like somewhat human.
Mm-hmm.
And which was interesting because, like in the movie, spoiler alerts again, but in the movie, the dad who like turns into the Wendigo, he felt that he was turning. So remember, he like put the locks on the door or whatever, and was like, don't let me out.
He was at least somewhat a sympathetic figure in that sense, that he was aware of what was happening, and he actually tried to keep his kids safe to an extent. Yeah, put all the locks on the door and was still a functioning person to a degree.
Yeah. And like the from that ethnographer, Lottie, I guess she wrote a book, and she kind of described it. But one time long ago, a big Wendigo stole an Indian boy, but the boy was too thin, so the Wendigo didn't eat him up right away. But he traveled with the Indian boy, waiting for him until he got fat. The Wendigo had a knife, and he'd cut the boy on the hand to see if he was fat enough to eat, but the boy didn't get fat. They traveled too much. One day they came to an Indian village, and the Wendigo sent the boy to the Indian village to get some things for him to eat. He just gave the boy so much time to go there and back. The boy told the Indians that the Wendigo was near them and showed them his hand where the Wendigo had cut him to see if he was fat enough to eat. They heard the Wendigo calling the boy. He said to the boy, "Hurry up, don't tell lies to those Indians." All of these Indians went to where the Wendigo was and cut off his legs. They went back again to see if he was dead, and he wasn't dead. He was eating the juice or the marrow from inside the bones of his own legs that were cut off. The Indians asked the Wendigo if there was any fat on them. He said, "You bet there is. I've eaten a lot of Indians. No wonder they are fat." The Indians then killed him, cut him to pieces, and that was the end of the giant Wendigo.
My goodness.
Yeah. So like from this account, yeah, right. So from this account, and I'm not sure if, this comes from like her interviewing Native Americans, like from the tribe, and like, because I'm assuming a lot of this stuff is like generational, just kind of passed down,
right.
like, stories that were kind of told around the campfire and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if like this is where that story comes from, but it kind of does illustrate like how the Wendigo is like still alive. Like he's a monster, he's a feral creature, but he still is like intelligent.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting to me. There's a lot of kind of descriptions of what the Wendigo is and how it came to be. According to some, the Wendigo is a demon, but some Wendigos can be created from humans who have been corrupted with greed and the hunger for human flesh. These victims are often transformed into Wendigos themselves, often from the touch or the possession of the beast, which is kind of what happened in the movie, after they give in to their carnivorous desires. With every victim these new Wendigos devour, they grow proportionately in size. It is said that Wendigos have the ability to grow to a size that is unfathomable by the human mind, and that the sight of a Wendigo who has devoured many souls is enough to make a human heart freeze in terror. So in some cultures, it grows to proportion with its meal and starves forever, and in other cultures, it eats and continues to eat souls and grows in size to Lovecraftian horror levels of things.
Yeah. Which I think in those cultures, that's probably more symbolic of like greed.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. And, like it definitely, and like I said, we'll kind of get into that, like the different variations of it. But I really like this one because you can definitely see like the symbolic or the symbolism within society and morals as to like where this,
how it evolved in the tribes.
Yeah. Yep.
So some believe also that a Wendigo is able to exist in the physical world, but it is actually a spirit form. Like many spirits, the Wendigo has the ability to become invisible, fly, become undetectable, and possess humans. It's said that the Wendigo is extremely selective with those that it chooses to possess. Most often, the creature will only possess people who are starving, who are gluttonous, who have had a craving for human flesh before, who are greedy, and have tendencies to display their wealth openly. So again, it's
social control.
It's social construct for sure. Anyone who becomes possessed with a Wendigo spirit will become Wendigos themselves, and this will continue to exist as a Wendigo until the spirit is exorcised or until they are killed. However, as Wendigos have incredible strength and are able to move with extreme strength and power, it is highly unlikely that a Wendigo could be killed. It is said that the final warning a Wendigo will give before striking is to unleash a blood-curdling howl in the harsh winter winds. The warning does little to help the victims. By the time they hear it, it's already too late.
Definitely sounds like an apex predator.
Yeah.
Like it's.
Yeah. So this thing it could be a demon. It could be a spirit. It could be a human who
like transformed
after eating a human.
Yeah.
Lots of different versions of it, but it also still comes back that it's, like you said, an apex predator. It's got large claws. Some described it as having large eyes like an owl.
Yeah. Yeah.
So definitely has all the characteristics that one would expect from like a giant jungle cat or something like that.
Hunts at night, probably.
Yeah. Can set its own traps, essentially.
Well, it can in some cases too. It can like mimic people, right? Like I've seen things where I've read that it has the ability to kind of like mimic people. So you're out in the woods, you hear like a human crying for help. You go to investigate, and it's a Wendigo.
See, I didn't see that in any of the research I did.
No,
mostly what I seen was that Wendigo is ruthless and enjoys terrifying its prey before making a kill. So the beast is known to stalk its prey for hours on end until they become impossibly frightened. And then a Wendigo may reveal itself to its victim with a loud shriek or a scream to increase their level of terror. So I don't see anything about it being able to mimic human sounds, but with a shriek or scream, I guess it could be.
Sure. Well, I guess too, if it still has like the human-like qualities, like it doesn't lose like its like ability to be human. If it's that intelligent, it still has that ability to like kind of sound like a human or whatever. So like it has like that thought. So that's like a possibility.
That's true.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Stalking its victims or whatever. Get all that blood and adrenaline pumping, and then go in for the kill.
Yeah,
just like hyped up on adrenaline because you're like eating it. It knows what it's doing.
Oh, for sure, it knows what it's doing. Its biggest thing is that it loves the hunt. It loves the thrill of having. Apparently, fear makes the victim taste better or something like that.
It gets all the adrenaline pumping in their blood. It gets it's a nice seasoned taste.
All the oxygen and stuff into the bloodstream. I have no scientific evidence of any of that happening, but
I thought I did once read that that's what like certain animals who like torture their prey. It's because they do that and they like get like the blood pumping and stuff like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of stuff about human cannibalism. That seems to be like the focal point. Of,
like I said earlier,
like
cannibalism is kind of the main origin point of. Like I said, it's a person that's succumbed to cannibalism because of starvation, and they become a Wendigo because now they have an insatiable taste for human flesh, and they become a Wendigo that way. Or it's a demon that feasts on human flesh purposefully. So it's cannibalism across the board.
Yeah,
this thing.
Which, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that like this creature kind of comes out of that. I mean, I think it's fair to say that cannibalism is pretty much frowned upon.
I would have to agree. Yes,
in like any society,
cannibalism is frowned upon. I would give you that one.
It's definitely like taboo, but it makes you wonder though, like where this like legend kind of originated from. This folk tale kind of came from. Like, was there? I'm assuming because there was like a famine or like a food.
Well, you got to think. I mean, the natives, because this pretty much originates closer to like the Canadian border, middle United States, upper Canada, kind of in that area.
Yeah,
where the winters are extremely brutal. Harsh. I'm sure the food supplies are incredibly thin or scarce at that time.
Yep.
So it's not impossible to think that at some point somebody in the tribe suggested, hey, maybe if we get desperate enough, maybe we can eat sitting guy over there. And everybody is like in the tribe was kind of, they're okay, we'll keep that idea in mind, but maybe let's not do that right now. And then eventually time passes, food is still scarce, and they're like, well, this is actually starting to sound pretty good. And that's when like the wise chief's like, no, you can't do that because then you'll turn into a Wendigo.
Just thinks of it over the top. Oh, a Wendigo, you never heard of those?
Yeah.
Like you never.
I was back when I was a kid. We had these things that if you thought about eating a human flesh and you're a human, you turn into a crazed man beast with antlers in your skull and your insatiable appetite.
Kind of sounds like you're just making that up.
No, it's totally real. Seen it.
I was there.
Fought it. Killed it. Only way you can kill it is by stabbing its heart out, which I did. I did that. Well, where's the heart at? It's
gone.
You gotta throw it into the water because if you don't, then it just festers and then becomes another Wendigo. It's got regenerative powers too.
It's like, okay, now this sounds a little ridiculous. Like, it just makes you like, it's something clearly like, all these stories, they come from somewhere.
Right. It's like previous episodes where we were talking about like the Snallygaster.
No.
How that was just a fear-based tool to keep people from sticking around too long.
Yeah,
Or
like,
Jersey Devil is just a metaphor for a family in New Jersey who was trying to do an almanac, and now that story pops up, and there you go.
Like dragging their name through the mud kind of thing. Yeah.
So it's not out of the question that a Wendigo is essentially just a, hey, don't be a cannibal and don't be greedy. Otherwise, you're going to turn into this horrific beast.
Which makes sense because if you think about it, like Native American tribe, it's very community based.
Very community based and very nature based.
Yeah.
So eating human flesh is not even feasible.
Yeah,
it's when you say it's taboo in other cultures, like Native American culture, it's because you have all the nature spirits. And if you eat another person, instead of praising the nature spirits for the feast that they give you from the forests, that's probably the worst crime you could commit against your country, against your homeland, against your tribe, anything like that.
It's like a transgression, like like any other, and to like it from like the social aspect of it. So don't be greedy. It's it's not good to be selfish. All of those things, the embodiment of what the Wendigo is. It's kind of like anti-community, and when it's like a very community-based, like social, I guess like not hierarchy, but like a social construct like that. Tales like this kind of like serve as guidance for the community as a whole.
Guidance and warning.
Yeah, pretty much. Like this is like the worst thing that could happen, like.
Yeah, because if you do it, there's no way anybody can stop you.
No.
If you turn into a Wendigo, what are we going to do to stop it?
Also, too, like from the individual standpoint, too, it kind of like there's no limit to it. Like you can never truly be satisfied, so if you give into that greed, you hurt others, you kind of become this like monstrous thing within yourself, which I think the Wendigo folktale is also like an embodiment of that. I heard you talking earlier about this, like what was it, Wendigo psychosis?
Oh yeah, Wendigo psychosis. Yeah.
What is that all about?
So that is basically I don't know if the right term is
Is it like a clinical thing?
It's like clinical in the sense that people have been diagnosed with it post-humanistically. So once this person does something, they kind of look back and say, what could have done this? And a theory that it's from Wendigo psychosis.
Okay.
Yeah. So in historical accounts of retroactively diagnosed Wendigo psychosis, it has been reported that humans became possessed by the Wendigo spirit after being in a situation of needing food and having no other choice besides cannibalism. In one instance, a man named Swift Runner, who you were kind of talking about earlier, in 1878, this story is messed up. So if you're not into gruesome things or that triggers you in any way, you might want to skip this part. So Swift Runner in 1878 was starving about 25 miles away from his emergency food stores, and his eldest son died. I didn't find a name on what his eldest son's name was or anything like that. Yeah. But after this, he murdered, butchered, and ate his wife and remaining 5 children. It was deemed that he was not just resorting to cannibalism, but rather he was possessed by the Wendigo spirit. Yeah. So,
oof.
Big oof.
Oof. Did you find any 1879, was there any sort of legal?
I didn't find anything. I think he just ended up dying on his own terms. I don't know if he.
Oh, here we go. He was eventually executed by authorities at Fort Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Given that he resorted to cannibalism so near to food supplies and that he killed and consumed the remains of all those present, it was revealed that Swift's Runner was not a case of pure cannibalism as a last resort to avoid starvation, but rather a man with Wendigo psychosis.
Yeah.
So they kind of looked at the evidence and the facts of the case, and it's like, okay.
And then posthumously, because they executed him first and then said that he had this.
I'm not sure if it was I'm not sure if when they gave him when the psychosis was put on him, but that was looking at the facts of it. Or if your food stores are only 25 miles away, and you murdered your whole entire family,
and not just murdered them,
butchered and ate them or whatever. And it's so they're trying to find the justification for cannibalism, and it's they couldn't justify it for obvious reasons.
I'm just looking at it saying as historical accounts of retroactively diagnosed. So
maybe
the way I take that is that he did all these heinous acts. They found him, captured him, executed him, and then at some point we're maybe it was Wendigo psychosis.
Yeah,
which I assume would have been kind of a new concept at that time.
I mean, fascination with Wendigo psychosis among Western ethnographers and psychologists led to a hotly debated controversy in the 1980s over the historicity of this phenomenon. Some researchers argue that Wendigo psychosis was a fabrication, the result of native anthropologists taking stories, related them at face value without observation. Other have pointed to the number of credible eyewitness accounts, both by the how did you say Algonquins, and others, as evidence that Wendigo psychosis was a factual historical phenomenon. So that, I mean, that makes sense, I guess. Like, people trying to make a name for themselves out in, like, anthropology and stuff like that, so they take it at face value.
There's a story here from the Jesuit Relations from 1661. There's a snippet from an article. What caused us greater concern was the news that met us upon entering the lake, namely that the men deputed by our conductor for the purpose of summoning the nations to the North Sea and assigning them a rendezvous where they were to await our coming, had met their death the previous winter in a very strange manner. Those poor men, according to the report given us, were seized with an ailment unknown to us, not very unusual among the people we were seeking. They were afflicted with neither lunacy, hypochondria, nor frenzy, but have a combination of all of these species of disease, which affects their imaginations and causes them a more than canine hunger. This makes them so ravenous for human flesh that they pounce upon women, children, and even upon men, like veritable werewolves, and devour them ferociously, without being able to appease or glut their appetite, ever seeking fresh prey. And the more greedily, the more they eat. This ailment attacked our deputies, and as death is the sole remedy among these simple people for checking such acts of murder, they are slain in order to stay the course of their madness.
That'd be terrible. The one thing that I haven't really found, though, in a lot of the research is, like, what is, like, patient zero?
What causes the Wendigo psychosis?
Like, who is, like, yeah, like, so, because, like, I'm seeing a lot of it as, like, okay, it's once you have it, you have to keep feeding, and it only gets worse.
Well, again, it's one of those things where you can either look at it from a mythological standpoint or a folklore standpoint or from a logical standpoint. If you would look at it from the mythological or folklore standpoint, it's because this person's being possessed by a demon known as the Wendigo, taking over your body, causing you these thoughts and these feelings of needing to feast on human flesh.
Gotcha.
Or you have the logical standpoint of you are miles away from any food source. You don't know what to do. So your last thought in your head is, I need to eat something or someone. And that just happens to be the people in your group, people in your tribe. And that's where it begins. And that's where the insanity starts, essentially. So you're necessarily not a patient zero per se, but.
And is it so from, like, the logical standpoint? So, okay, you eat this first person.
And then, yeah, essentially you get a taste for human flesh and then nothing else compares to it.
Insatiation.
So
then, okay. Yeah. All right. And you just turn into this monstrosity. Like, okay.
Yeah. And a monstrosity in a more psychological standpoint than an actual physical standpoint.
Yeah. Like, which that makes sense, and you've heard stories before of, like, people having resort to cannibalism, and there's, like, this, excessive amount of guilt afterwards, and they're like, I can't believe I did that. And it's like, well, you were starving and you had to do what you had to
eat
do,
or be eaten,
like,
I guess.
It's like you're trying to, like, survive, these stories of, like, people crashing up in, like, the mountains. I think it was, like, there's a movie on Netflix. I'm not sure what the name is, but the premise is it's like back in the 70s, there was, like, some plane, I think it crashed in the Andes in South America.
I think I know what you're talking about.
And essentially they resort to cannibalism to survive. And it's like them kind of, like, processing the trauma of, like, surviving the plane crash, but then also processing the trauma of, like, having to, like, resort to cannibalism to survive.
Yeah. I'm sure. Well, I mean, there's been reports of that, I think, also in either World War I or World War II, where you get stuck in a foxhole or something and your person you're in there with dies and you're trapped and you're imprisoned. There's nothing else to eat.
No.
So there's been reports of people resorting to cannibalism that way too, but which that would be, talk about unparalleled guilt. If you got stuck in a foxhole with your buddy, that'd be like me and you sit in a foxhole, one of us dies, and then
I'm eating his leg like like a ham hock.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't even imagine that.
Why does he taste so good?
So, although in many recorded cases of Wendigo psychosis, the individual has been killed to prevent cannibalism. Some Cree folklore recommends treatment by ingestion of fatty animal meats or drinking animal grease. Those treated may sometimes vomit ice as part of the curing process.
Oh.
How do you vomit ice?
I don't know. There's a lot of magic and unexplainable things happening within the Wendigo.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
That would be a weird feeling. Vomiting.
Did you see the one about the case of Wendigo psychosis that afflicted Jack Fiddler, an OG Cree chief and a medicine man known for his powers at defeating Wendigos?
I did not. Please enlighten me. This sounds like a juicy story here. Like,
so in some cases, this entailed killing people with Wendigo psychosis. As a result, in 1907, Fiddler and his brother Joseph were arrested by the Canadian authorities for homicide. Jack committed suicide, but Joseph was tried and sentenced to a life in prison. He ultimately was granted a pardon, but died 3 days later in jail before receiving news of his pardon. So, essentially, Jack Fiddler killed a bunch of people who he deemed to have Wendigo psychosis, and then was tried and acquitted of his crimes by a court, saying that what he did was perfectly justifiable.
That's crazy.
I don't know.
That's just crazy.
I do not know how that happens.
Well, you did have Wendigo psychosis, and there's no cure for that right now. So I guess, by all accounts, we do need to let him go. It wasn't his fault, by reasons of insanity.
I got 30 bodies out here, sir. We cannot just let this man walk away.
No. Now ask yourself, what would you do if you were in this man's shoes? And you had the Wendigo psychosis. Would you sit there and, you would want the empathy and the sympathy? We're going to let you go. You go ahead.
Well, Jack Fiddler didn't have Wendigo psychosis. He was the Van Helsing of Wendigo psychosis. He was the medicine man who was killing all the people with Wendigo psychosis.
Oh. I misunderstood.
He's just a mass murderer
of people that he thought. Okay.
He pretty much accused them of having Wendigo psychosis.
So we got to put him down.
Exactly.
Oh wait, I think I just have a cold. No. You got
see that look of human flesh in your brain.
No, this is a turkey sandwich.
Looks like you want to eat my flesh.
It's a turkey sandwich. Like it's not. I do not want to eat flesh.
Oh, I see that look in your eyes.
No, I literally just came here because I have a cold and I was told to come visit you. Do you have a cure for that?
I sure do. Just look right down this barrel of the shotgun for me.
Okay. I feel a lot better.
We're going to check your vision.
I feel better now. The cold's gone. That would be horrible. That's just too much power.
That's way too much power.
That should be a movie.
Of course, it's 1907, so it's the wild frontier at that point.
That should be a movie.
It should be.
I want to see the history of Jack Fiddler,
the Wendigo destroyer.
And I want it to be where he actually played the fiddle. Like he had a fiddle case and he would open it up and that would be like his medicine bag. It's just filled with trinkets.
It's like the devil went down to Georgia. Only in this case, he's beating the shit out of people with a fiddle.
Yeah, it's like a fiddle. And that's like his weapon of choice. He opens up like the fiddle case and like he's got like this one right here. Oh, this is my favorite trick. 9mm.
Let me play you a tune. So 1907, Wendigo psychosis running wild, and Jack Fiddler just taking him out. I just can't believe that he got acquitted from it. Like he got pardoned.
They probably
he was tried and sentenced to life in prison, but then was granted a pardon, but died 3 days later.
Probably because they saw it as like a public service. Like you killed 30 Wendigos. Could you imagine, folks? 30 Wendigos running around this community, wreaking havoc. This man is a hero.
Others have pointed to a number of credible eyewitness accounts, both by Algonquins and others, as evidence that Wendigo psychosis was a factual historical phenomenon. You said about this earlier that it was a hotly debated controversy in the 1980s. So apparently there are Algonquin peoples who had firsthand accounts of seeing Wendigo psychosis in full effect.
No. In 2004, in his 2004 treatise, Revenge of the Wendigo, on disorders and treatments of the behavioral health industry in the United States and Canada that are peculiar to the indigenous people, James B. Waldron wrote, "No actual cases of Wendigo psychosis have ever been studied, and Lou Morano's scathing critique in 1985 should have killed off the cannibal monster within the psychiatric annals. The Wendigo, however, continues to seek revenge for this attempted scholarly execution by periodically duping unsuspecting passerbys like psychiatrists into believing that Wendigo psychosis not only exists, but that a psychiatrist could conceivably encounter a patient suffering from this disorder in his or her practice today. Wendigo psychosis may well be the most perfect example of the construction of an aboriginal mental disorder by the scholarly professions, and its persistence dramatically underscores how constructions of the aboriginal by these professions have, like Frankenstein's monster, have taken a life of their own." That's crazy.
That is
so
literally and figuratively speaking.
Yeah. So like imagine you're a psychiatrist up until this point, and there's been no like actual clinical studies on like this Wendigo psychosis. It's pretty much just like firsthand accounts. And okay, well, this guy's got Wendigo psychosis. Okay, well, let's treat it.
Yeah.
And it's like here's some.
And the way you treat it is by feeding them animal fat or animal grease or shooting them in the hip.
Yeah, it's not crazy. I mean, which I'm actually really not surprised about this, because have you ever seen like so the DSM, which is like it's essentially the clinical book that psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers that they use to diagnose people with mental disorders. It's called the DSM.
Okay.
And I think the current version of it, it's like I could be wrong. I think it's like the 7 or
8th volume.
Yeah, like
volume.
they came out like, well, it started out as something else way back in the day, and then it's evolved over like the course of like X amount of years, because they review it every so couple of years. They take out old things, put new things in, whatever. And like, but you can actually find like, I think it's like the 4th or the 5th version, like from the 50s, and like that, just as an example, like homosexuality is actually listed in there.
Oh yeah,
as a mental disorder.
Oh, I'm sure. And then you get lobotomized for it.
Yeah, just freaking crazy shit that like that was wild back then.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't too far removed from the late 1800s as well, where I don't know how much you know about. We talked about Dan Sickles and Goes to Gettysburg, right? He shot and murdered Francis Scott Key's son. I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but in the streets of Washington, D.C., after he supposedly found out that Key was sleeping with his wife, shot and murdered him. They tried him, and he was set free because he pleaded temporary insanity. It was the first case of temporary insanity, and they bought it and let him go. So Wendigo psychosis and temporary insanity aren't that different, I don't think. Besides, one makes you want to eat people, and the other one, you're just insane. So
to clarify, the current issue of the DSM is the DSM-5, is the current standing issue. Well, it's the DSM-5 TR text revision, so that means that they probably went back and like edited things out and like kind of changed some things and like
worded it differently.
Yeah, and like changed the actual criteria. So I wonder if it'd be cool to find like an older DSM, like the version 1 or 2, and see like what. I wonder if Wendigo psychosis is in there.
There's some real fucked up shit in there.
Oh yeah, like it's like insanity, like just some of the things that they thought were actual disorders back then.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if there is like Wendigo psychosis in there. Probably not if it's never clinically been studied.
Well, it's in the 10th revision of the International Statistics Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems, and it's classified as a culture-specific disorder, describing it as a rare, historic account of cannibalistic obsession. Symptoms included depression, homicidal or suicidal thoughts, and a delusional, compulsive wish to eat human flesh. Some controversial new studies question the syndrome's legitimacy, claiming cases were actually a product of hostile accusations invented to justify the victim's ostracism or execution.
It's funny that you say that. I did see something about it, kind of comparing it to like the Salem witch trials.
Oh.
Where it was kind of like this, like a kind of a scare of like, but I guess
I would say it's more of people,
like a panic of like a Wendigo community.
Yeah, but it sounds to me it's more people trying to rationalize why they murdered a bunch of people.
Possible.
Like this guy, Fiddler.
Murdered 30 people.
Murdered however many people. Yeah, Wendigo psychosis.
Yeah. But nobody like thought the question, well, what about that guy? Yeah, right. He just murdered 30 people. He murdered 30 Wendigos. No, they were just normal people.
Yeah, right.
It's like, this guy's a psychopath.
Nope, get him out of jail. He's clean as a whistle.
Case.
He's beating children with it.
He strangled that man with the strings. It's like, no, he's a hero.
He's the hero we all deserve. Just not the one we needed, right?
What is wrong with you people? Oh my gosh.
Sound an awful lot like a Wendigo talking right now.
Right? And like, I think that guy's a Wendigo.
Fiddler, get over here. Yeah, so it sounds to me like it was kind of a form of justification for the people who executed the quote unquote Wendigos.
It could have been
as a means to justify why they were executed.
Sure.
So take that for what you will. So to kind of get away from the Wendigo psychosis a little bit, I'd like to kind of go back to some of the traits known with a Wendigo, like its powers.
Sure.
Some of its more mythological status things.
Yeah.
So as we said before, the Wendigo is known for its insatiable greed and hunger for human flesh, but it sometimes has been depicted as a demonic spirit that also has power over winter storms and weather events.
Ooh.
Yeah. Because of this, the creature is often associated with the harsh winters of the north. It is said that an angry Wendigo can cause the sky to darken and extreme weather such as harsh winter winds, tornadoes, and blizzards. The Wendigo is often depicted as a supernatural creature It has the ability to bring famine and harsh winter storms to bear over land. These conditions give it ideal hunting grounds and plentiful victims, both to satisfy its hunger and its need to share its twisted desires. So Wendigo, he can throw down, man.
How would you rank the scale from 1 to 10?
Of power? Like power level?
Cryptid.
Oh, man, he's got to be like an 8.
I think
he's an 8. Yeah.
I think so?
I mean, because it's, yeah. So he's got sharp claws, eyes like an owl that he can probably see in the dark with.
Okay.
He apparently has storm calling abilities and winter storm calling abilities to
can manipulate the weather,
make the hunting grounds more advantageous for him. And from what I understand, from what I read earlier, it seems to be almost impossible to kill one. He has the ability to become invisible, fly, and become undetectable, and he can possess humans.
I had it in the research. I didn't see anything about like the actual weakness, like how you kill one.
Yeah.
But the movie, which I don't know if this was just like a thing that they kind of made up for the movie. It's like, oh, you gotta,
a plot device.
You gotta take out his heart.
Yeah, no, they said that you had to wait for its weakened state,
which comes from feeding. Like, so the more he eats, the weaker he gets. Which I kind of thought.
Which he starves because he's starving.
Which that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah. So when he eats, after he's eating. Again, spoiler alerts for the movie Antlers. At the very end, when he's eating the bear, had just feasted. So he's now even weaker, and she was able to stab its heart out and kill it that way.
And did you notice,
and then it was going to possess the little kid.
Yeah.
And then she killed the little kid because he had yet to become a full Wendigo.
Yeah. When he started to turn into one.
Yeah.
Did you notice, too, when she had the flare?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of like backed away from the fire. Yeah. Is that like a thing? Like
it might be. Like, I mean, if it's associated with cold and famine and the north, I guess fire would be a kind of a natural.
It kind of had like an adverse reaction to like her pulling her flare out, and like,
or maybe it's sensitive to light.
That's what I'm saying. Is it like because of it's like the heat, or is it because it doesn't like light?
Yeah.
But it didn't. I don't know, because like in the film, it attacked a couple people during the day.
That's true.
It attacked that kid like in broad daylight.
It's true.
So.
Maybe it's just the fire and the fact that it was weak. It couldn't really defend itself properly from it, so it was kind of rearing from it.
The heart, it burned her hands. Remember, she like reached in, pulled the heart out, like scalded her hands.
Yeah,
and it kind of had like embers and smoke coming out of its like chest.
Well, yeah, and then when it busted out of the guy in the first place, it said that it was his body charred and burned. So fire might be a thing that's its weakness, but it's. Yeah.
I didn't see anything in like the research. Like
I didn't really either. So I mean, when you think about a cryptid powerhouse, I mean, this one's up there, man. I might change my answer to an 8.5 without even finding any real weaknesses. What about you?
How would he fare? How would the Wendigo fare against Mike Tyson?
Mike Tyson might be a Wendigo since he has bitten off an ear.
Oh shit!
He has the taste for human flesh. Oh my god! Did we just discover a deep, dark secret that we shouldn't have known? Nick, somebody's outside your house about to be on. It's the FBI.
No, it is Mike
Tyson. Shit, Mike Tyson might be a Wendigo.
Damn it.
He hasn't eaten any human flesh lately, as far as we know.
That's true. But he also has the funds to like satiate.
She said he has the funds.
The funds to satiate his ever-growing hunger.
Yeah, it's true. And he's in great shape, though. He doesn't look like he's starving.
It's because he follows a clinically proven diet for Wendigos.
Animal fat, grease, meats, human flesh.
Wendigos.
He's the one that he's like a mix where they get taller and bigger, but doesn't starve. He just stays the same. He's what Jack Fiddler would call a Wendigo. And then kill him.
He's like that guy over there, has so much more money, more ripped than I am, more successful.
I've seen him bite off a guy's ear.
Oh, he's a Wendigo.
Oh, for sure.
Gotta take him out.
100%. I think Wendigo could beat Mike Tyson.
Think so?
I think so.
I'm talking like 90s era. Mike
Tyson. I feel like I think the Wendigo would probably give him a good. I mean, it's the antlers for me. It's in the claws.
Yeah,
he's got range, man.
That's cool. That's true.
He's got the range.
He's got height. He's definitely got height.
I mean, it depends on which version you look at, I suppose, but he's definitely got a lot of advantages to him. I think it's just the antlers.
I think if it's the version of the Wendigo where it's like the stalker kind of in the shadows.
Okay, so yeah, you have to look at it this way. Is it a Wendigo and Mike Tyson in a boxing ring? That how they're fighting? Or is it Mike Tyson gets dropped off in the Canadian wilderness and has to try to fight this thing in the forest somewhere?
Let's do that version.
You drop Mike Tyson in the Canadian wilderness He's done for. The Wendigo's got him. No problem. He's gonna call down a lightning, thunder, winter snowstorm. Mike Tyson will not be able to see anything. Wendigo's gonna shriek as loud as he can shriek. Tyson's gonna turn around and get his face eaten off.
Okay, that's fair, I guess.
What do you mean you guess? That's the only way it can go down.
I just imagine like the Wendigo striking and then Mike just sitting there with the snow pouring down, listening off his chest. He just turns around at the right moment and just like rocket punches, cracks the skull.
I think it could stun the Wendigo for a second.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's going to take it down fully.
Okay. What about John J. Rambo?
Oh, Rambo's screwed.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one that can beat the Wendigo.
Arnold Schwarzenegger from The Predator?
No.
Who?
John Cena.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
The Wendigo could not see him. So they have an even playing field. They're both invisible.
Okay. Fine. I would put the Wendigo at...
Okay, here, before you grade it, I have another piece of info for you to base this off of.
Okay.
So Wendigos are also very intelligent compared to other similar beasts and demons. They are hypersensitive and able to stay attuned to every inch of their hunting grounds, which can sometimes stretch for many miles. They are also intuitive about their hunting needs. If they sense that they may soon run out of a food supply, they will sometimes take the entrails of their victims and put them in large pots as backup measure. These pots are then placed at the very tops of tree branches where only the Wendigo can reach, and if a Wendigo senses that it will be an especially harsh winter, it will sometimes take victims alive and keep them prisoner in its lair until it's ready to feed.
Yeah,
Does that change your opinion?
They're very intelligent. They're not...
The terror of their victims is perhaps the only form of joy a Wendigo feels.
Wow, what a jerk. Yeah, all right, fine. I think the intelligence factor, I'm going to rank it at 9.
9?
Yeah. So, like, we'll say 0 is, like, complete no, like...
You can kick this thing like a puppy.
Yeah. Like, that's, like, yeah. And then a 10 is, like, your ass is grass and it's about to get mowed.
This is, you're fighting Cthulhu.
Yeah.
A 10 is Cthulhu.
Cthulhu's
a 10.
Okay, well, then I wouldn't put the Wendigo at, like, a 9.
Yeah, we should have established so 0 is little Timmy, who's 2 years old down the street.
Is he a cryptid?
No.
Oh.
He's not a cryptid.
Oh, okay.
Well, he could be. He could be a cryptid. He's a little skeleton boy.
Sure.
I wonder if there's any cryptids like that.
The
thin boy in the Wendigo story you're talking about.
We'll say the 0 is the squonk.
Squonk. 0 is the squonk.
0 is the squonk.
Okay.
And 10 is Cthulhu. I mean, he's not really a cryptid. He's more like a mythological, like...
He's a cosmic powerhouse.
But he's like a fictitious, like, cryptid. There's like...
Yeah, but aren't all cryptids kind of fictitious to an extent?
I mean, I'm saying, like...
I know what you mean. Like, he's not a typical...
Like, he was created... Yeah, he was, like, created by Lovecraft for, like, his lore.
Okay, then who's our 10?
Our 10?
Who's our 10 in the cryptids, then? If it's not Cthulhu, who is it?
Who would be a good 10?
I'm thinking Snallygaster could be a 10.
He's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, he's pretty OP.
He's pretty OP. And I think the Wendigo would
match up well.
Would match up well against like the...
I think the Snallygaster beats the Wendigo.
Think so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Mothman might be able to beat the Wendigo. Well, maybe not. I don't know.
Mothman really doesn't have like any...
He doesn't really have any special powers. But
he's thick.
But if the Wendigo sees Mothman, that's the harbinger of doom right there. So maybe that just means something really bad and he beats him by proxy.
He like goes to chase after him and like trips over a rock.
Like, snaps his neck.
Snaps his neck on a tree. So we're going to say the Snallygaster's a 10.
I think the Snallygaster's a 10, yeah.
All right, I would put the Wendigo at like an 8. No,
okay.
I'll match your 8.
Okay.
With the intelligence factor, maybe a 9.
Yeah. Okay, here's one, because we were going to talk about maybe doing this as a joint episode, a Skinwalker and a Wendigo. Do you put them at the same kind of power level? Or do you think a Skinwalker... I think a Skinwalker might be a little more powerful, based on the fact that it can mimic
the mimicry. Yeah, like the... No, what changes it for me is I still think the Wendigo has the upper hand because he can control the weather in some cases.
That's true. Yeah.
That's pretty OP. Like Storm from like the X-Men, she's considered like one of the most like powerful mutants because she can control the weather.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. But she's using the weather to inflict damage to her opponent. The Wendigo is using the storm pretty much to give itself home field advantage in its hunting. So is it really using can it call lightning down and strike you? Probably not. But it can probably cause a giant snowstorm.
Like a blizzard.
Then you can't see 2 feet in front of you. It makes it really difficult for you to move and run.
Yeah.
And you're going to freeze your tits off.
It's true. Frozen titties never helped anybody. Trust me, I know. And guess who made an appearance in Fallout 76?
Our good buddy.
Our good buddy, the Wendigo.
Man, Fallout 76 really went for all the cryptids.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's wild.
What other pop culture things was he in? Anything? I know
he was in like the very first season of Super. Oh, I say he as it's like this. The Wendigo.
Did you just assume it's pronouns?
Yeah, I'm sorry. His 2024. We don't do that. Like
his pronouns are Wenda and Go.
Wenda and Go. They, he, she, it.
It's demon spirit.
It's the Wendigo appeared in I think season 1 of Supernatural. It might have been like one of the first episodes. Like
really?
Episode 1 or 2 or 3. Yeah, like that's the pilot. Like they go, it's a couple of hunters that go missing, and they like determine like this is a Wendigo or whatever.
Of course they did.
It appears as a kind of like a Bigfoot like being in 70s in Marvel comic books. It was a
yeah, he was like a relative of Bigfoot, I think.
Was it
in the 70s? I think, or something like of sorts.
Was he a villain or of the Hulk? Did the Hulk fight him? Because he appeared in the Hulk, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if he was a villain or not. He was. That's a good question. If we have any comic book nerds out there, and you know anything about the Wendigo showing up in Marvel Comics, I can't wait for him to show up in the MCU. If that's the case.
The Wendigo?
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be dope. That'd be like he's like the next like villain.
Yeah. Who would you have played the Wendigo?
Well, it would most likely be like a CGI version of him. So,
but let's have fun with it a little bit. I mean, you could CGI him, but according to this is just coming from Wikipedia, honestly. The Marvel Comics version does not resemble a traditional Wendigo as portrayed by popular culture, but rather a silver-haired Bigfoot-like being. It appeared in The Incredible Hulk number 162 in April of 1973. So if it's a Bigfoot-like character, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to CGI it. You can give it some facial features and some intelligence.
Who would voice it, though? I'm going to go with Danny DeVito.
I was going to say Andy Serkis. So...
What about Andy Milonakis?
Oh my God. Well, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah, for sure. Is he still alive?
I have no idea. I truthfully do not know.
Okay, who would win a fight?
Andy Milonakis or the Wendigo? Andy Milonakis for sure.
All bets on Andy.
Have you seen the Andy Milonakis show? That guy can do anything.
Yeah, he's still alive.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah.
He was in Dark Was the Night, The Lone Ranger. I didn't know he was in The Lone Ranger, the 2013 movie with Johnny Depp. I never seen it.
The Wendigo was?
Mm-hmm. To an extent, I assume.
I don't even remember watching it.
He was also in another 2021 movie called The Inhuman.
Oh, was that the one with... Oh, nope, I don't know what that is. I haven't seen it. I got a 5.9 out of 10, though, so it must not be that good.
Well, I want to know what it looked like in Fallout 76. It was also in the video game Dusk, which is a 2018 first-person shooter. Wendigos are enemies that remain invisible until they receive damage. That's got to be tough to beat. That's what I'm talking about. A Wendigo's so OP that until you damage, it's like the Predator. That's what I equate it to.
Gotcha.
The Wendigo versus Predator would be a better matchup, I think, than anything.
Yeah, but the Wendigo, it kind of, and from like the Fallout standpoint, it looks actually a little bit more accurate. Not so much like the antlers, but more like the father did before he turned into like the full blown Wendigo in the movie. So like the bones and like the decrepit look and like the frayed hair, like balding or whatever. It looks more like that.
Gotcha. It was also apparently had a little bit of a hand in inspiring a character in Stephen King's novel Pet Sematary. That was a personification of evil, an ugly grinning creature with yellow-gray eyes, ears replaced by ram's horns, white vapor coming from its nostrils, and a pointed, decaying yellow tongue. Pretty interesting.
Terrifying is what it is, for sure.
Terrifying is what it is. And then, pretty much like we were saying, conceptually, the Wendigo, it's kind of a Native American tale of sorts where it can apply to any person, idea, or a movement infected by a corrosive drive towards self, greed, and excessive consumption.
Yeah, so it's kind of like anti-capitalism and like
guess.
That like they were saying like with like the mass extermination of like Native Americans back in like the 1600s, all the way up until like slavery in like the early 1900s. All the way up until like World War II, like the Nazis and like the Jews and stuff like that. From like that societal embodiment, the Wendigo is kind of seen as like this amalgamation of like just pure evil, and like this ever growing like. So with Hitler, it was like he had this mass greed, Europeans coming over from the New World, and like the expansion of that, it's kind of seen as like that reason of like mass greed, capitalism, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So to kind of wrap it up, the tale of the Wendigo is often seen as a warning against corruption that was told to prevent people from engaging in immoral behaviors. The Wendigo is also likely used to serve as a metaphor to understand terrible acts committed by other people that couldn't be understood otherwise.
I wouldn't want to cross paths with one.
So we always kind of, when we get into these cryptids, if we think that they're real or not. What do you think, Nick? Do you think it's a real thing?
Yeah.
So confident in that answer.
Yeah. I don't know.
This particular thing, I definitely think it's just more folklore than anything.
I tend to think that most cryptids are
really I see some of them I think can exist.
More believe like another cryptid, we'll do another episode on this one, but like Thunderbirds.
Yeah.
I definitely think that there's some like
something like that out there.
Yeah. Like some giant form of bird that either did exist way back in the day, but has
like prehistoric.
That did exist way back in the day, but has since then become extinct.
Right.
Like, have you ever heard of moa birds?
Heard of what?
Moa birds. I think that's what they're called, moa birds.
I have
like out in like New Zealand and stuff like that. There's like depictions of like the 1700s, I think, of hunters like hunting these like huge birds that were like, but they've gone extinct since then. And you can find like fossilized eggs, and this is semi-recent, like 300, 400 years ago.
Oh wow.
So I think like Thunderbirds are pretty cryptids like that, I think. But as far as like a Wendigo goes, no, I think it's more just like a folklore, cautionary tale.
Cautionary tale. Tall tale. Don't do heinous acts. Don't eat people.
Don't be greedy.
Don't be greedy.
Don't eat people. That's the biggest thing.
That's the biggest takeaway here is don't eat people.
Yeah. Like you can be a jerk sometimes, but don't eat people.
That's it's a pretty bare minimum expectation, I think.
Yeah.
Just don't eat people.
Like wake up, go to work, do your job,
have a cup of coffee.
Have a cup of coffee. No, put that thumb down. Stop it. We don't do that.
Yep. Don't be a Hannibal Lecter.
Exactly. Like it's you think it's just a cautionary tale?
Yeah, I think it's in this case, definitely think it was more of a warning in those harsh winter climates amongst the indigenous people living up there to ensure that their tribes didn't resort to such heinous acts because it would have been easy for them to do so. And for them to lose their way, to lose their
keep their humanity,
and still, from what I do know about Native American culture and spirituality, to keep them kind of pure in the eyes of nature a little bit, because they're very nature-oriented people.
Yeah.
And I feel like eating another person would be one of the most heinous things. I mean, in any culture, it's one of the most heinous things you can do.
There's no coming back.
Yeah, there's no coming back from it. So I think to keep their tribe kind of with morals and to a true north, just warning of the Wendigo was enough. And it always interests me still with these cryptids, where these tales come from and how they evolve into what they are. Like, how did they come up with what the Wendigo actually ended up looking like in some folklore and how it looks today in modern pop culture, and how they got that from, hey, don't eat people and be a good person that's not greedy.
You're going to turn into this giant antler demon with a skull and this insatiable need.
It's pretty awesome to think about how humans can envision that kind of a thing, a personification of what that evil would look like to them. And then it just stays that way for hundreds of years.
It'll be interesting to see the personification of the squad.
So as always, you can find us on Facebook, Shadows and Sightings, a paranormal podcast, or on Instagram, Shadows and Sightings Pod. Send us an email, shadowsandsightings@gmail.com. I'd like to hear your feedback. If you have any cryptids, ghost stories, urban legends, weird, spooky things that you want us to talk about, or anything like that, just drop us a line. Let us know. So with that being said, thanks y'all for listening.
Yep, we'll talk to you soon, guys.
We'll catch you next time when we talk about all things spooky.